Welcome to Opera Holland Park on Saturday, July the 17th, between 2 and 4 in the afternoon. We'll be bringing you the first ever Word in Your Park from this very pleasant, airy, covered but socially distanced auditorium.
No, Word in Your Park is going to be a weatherproof event. We're under canvas, but we have taken the precaution of booking 2 hours of blistering sunshine just in case, and it's going to be us and some old pals of ours involved in 2 hours of rock and roll storytelling, involving Gary Crowley, Leslie Ann Jones, Barney Hoskins, and others to be announced. There'll be mood-altering drinks available, and who knows, crisps.
It's been a long, cold, lonely winter, so it'll be good to see you here. Get your tickets at the link below. See you there.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a view.
Welcome to another Word in Your Attic. Now, Dave and I are still rightly proud of our early journalistic assignments, being on the road with Bram Tchaikovsky's Battle Axe and the Little River Band. We're now joined by someone whose first published piece was about Louis Armstrong and first interview with Eric Clapton of the Yardbirds. He wins! Yes. So our great hero back in the day on the Melody Maker, the mighty Chris Welch. Chris, it's lovely to see you.
Good morning, Mark. And Dave, lovely to see you. Yes, it's fantastic.
Where are you? I think you moved to Kent, didn't you, a while ago?
Yes, well, I grew up in Catford, actually Stratford in the East End.
Right.
Post-war. And then the family moved to upmarket to Catford, so it's much better up there, where there were cinemas and trams, and it's all very exciting. That was in
trams? My God. You can remember trams?
I do. I remember riding on one of the last ones, actually, 1952. My dad took me for a ride, and I thought we were going all the way to Woolwich, but we got off at Lee. I was very disappointed. He wouldn't pay the extra fare for the whole journey. So.
God, we've been trumped again. We can remember steam trains, but trams, that's fantastic.
Yes, trams were marvellous, yeah. And in Stratford, we had trolley buses as well, so that was even better.
Incredible. Wow. Well, look, the traditional question that kicks these things off tends to be, can you remember the record playing equipment in your home when you were young? Can you remember what was and what was playing on it, actually?
Well, I can, actually, very clearly, actually. It was a wind-up HMV clockwork gramophone, which my parents had, and it must have been pre-war, obviously. And the first record I played on it was by George Formby, and it was Tiger Rag. He actually did a jazz record.
Oh, really?
It was called Swing It George, and because he played fantastic ukulele. He was the Jimi Hendrix of the ukulele.
I never heard that one before.
No.
And this record, it was the first time I heard jazz, really, because he did an instrumental version of Tiger Rag. It was a medley. I discovered it recently on Spotify, so you can still hear it in the player. But this record thrilled me, but unfortunately the gramophone eventually, the spring went inside it, and I had to turn the turntable by hand, so that wasn't very effective. And also my old brother, he told me that they had two little doors in front of the speaker, a very primitive system. It's all needles, of course, metal needles, and wind-up gramophone. And he told me that there was a little band playing inside the record player. So if I opened the doors, I'd be able to look in and see George Formby inside the box, which I believed entirely. And was very.
Oh, that's adorable.
But I opened the doors and there was nobody there, and he was rolling on the floor with laughter. That was his joke. So,
can you remember the first record you bought with your own money?
Yes, I do actually. Funny enough, I think it was Sugar Child Robinson. Numbers Boogie, because I love Boogie Woogie. My dad was a big fan of the famous pianist, whose name I've not completely forgotten. It will come back to me in a second.
Winifred Atwell?
Winifred Atwell.
Oh, right, yeah.
Huge fan of Winifred
Atwell. Bumble Boogie.
Yeah.
Great record.
So the house is full of Boogie Woogie records. And we had a grand band as well. My dad played on that. So, but I think the first record I bought was Sugar Child Robinson. He was a boy wonder pianist, and I don't know if you remember the name at all.
No, I don't at all.
I don't know.
So when are we talking about, Chris? If you don't mind me asking.
No, this is in the 50s. This would have been about. The episode with the gramophone was in the 1940s, and I was very little. And I was about 6 or 7 years old, and And then we had a proper electric record player. That was a big jump forward, with the turntable, a proper electric turntable. But you had to plug it into the wireless in order to hear the music. So quite primitive, the early recording system playing back.
You had to really try, didn't you, to hear music in those days? It was quite hard to do, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a big effort. You know, you had to queue up in record shops and buy records and hope they'd have them. You might have to order a record and wait for weeks before it would turn up, or days anyway. And
Can you remember the record shops you went to in Catford?
Yes, there was an HMV in the high street, a big record shop, and they had a great big disc on the pavement, a huge, great big wooden disc with a label on it, so you'd know it was a record shop, which is a handy idea. And you queue up in, and there was also a record collector's shop, Pete Payne's Records, and that was like very mostly jazz records and 78s. And I got banned from standing there for about 2 hours and then buying one record for 10p. They didn't like that at all. So.
But that's what everybody did.
I know.
That's what we did. We sat around reading the sleeve notes and trying to work out when we could possibly afford to buy whatever it is we wanted to buy. I mean,
I couldn't believe it. The attitude of the guy, he got cross with me. He thought I was taking the mickey out of me. Because I was carefully looking through all the records to find the best one, obviously, as a collector.
So do you play music?
Yes. Well, my dad played the piano, and my mum played the violin, and I took up the drums. Actually, my first instrument, very disappointing. It was a triangle.
Right.
At the infant school I went to, they had a percussion band, and they threw all the instruments on the floor in a heap, and everybody had to run and grab an instrument. So, and of course, I wanted the snare drum, but I ended up with the triangle. So, pretty upset.
So, were you in band? You were in bands, though, weren't you? I think.
Later on, yes, I was. Yeah, well, the first group I was in was a skiffle group, of course, 1956. I think that's when we started.
What was the name of the group?
Well, it was called the Catford Skiffle Kings, entirely inspired by Lonnie Donegan. Because when we were at school, Lonnie had that huge hit with which I heard on the radio, coming home from school, and I'd never heard anything like it. We'd not heard blues records, really. Didn't know much about black American music, to tell you the truth, apart from some R&B records we'd heard, maybe Fats Domino and Sugar Child Robinson. But to hear that kind of music revived from the 1930s is just amazing, really. Just hearing Rock Island. When I went to school the next day, everybody had heard the record. Everybody wanted to take up the guitar or the washboard or play a drum or a kazoo, anything to make music like that.
What did you play in your skiffle group?
Well, originally it was sorry, it wasn't a triangle. It was a washboard.
Right.
Well, of course, the drummer. Yeah.
Did you have a washboard in the house, or did you ever have to go and buy one in a musical instrument shop, or did you happen to have one?
Well, that's an interesting story because we didn't have a washboard, but my mum kindly went down to the nearest hardware shop and bought one for me. And she supplied me with a collection of thimbles.
And thimbles, of course. Absolutely.
So you had a brand new washboard that had never been used in the washing process at all. It was
absolutely, yes. I think we'd actually got some kind of primitive washing machine by then. So
that's not quite in the spirit of the movement, actually.
No.
So on the bass, did they have a T-chest bass with a broom handle, or was it more advanced than that?
No. My friend Bill, he got a T-chest, and he attached a sort of wooden pole to it and a piece of string or rope, tough string, and you could actually make a noise like a bass if you tied the string to the box, great T-chest, and you pulled the stick backwards and forwards. You could change the note.
You bent the note.
Yeah,
that's right. Oh, incredible! And where did you play then? Just youth clubs or something?
Well, we started out in our guitar players. Oh, by the way, we made the guitars as well.
Amazing!
Of course.
And they made these really primitive guitars, which sort of played.
Yeah. The
best woodwork operatives at school could make guitars. So we had this very primitive group, and we rehearsed in our friend's bedroom upstairs, and we made the most appalling noise. And one day we couldn't play very well, and one day we just got so fed up we just decided to record the instruments and scream at the top of their voice. You know, it's like an early punk rock band.
Right.
Destruction, auto-destruction.
Auto-destruction. Pete Townsend, yes. That's very impressive. So we're going to get onto your transition to the melody maker, but you went to, I think, the Scotsman, or there's a Fleet Street paper that you worked on, wasn't there? Is that right? Yes. Very early on?
Well, before that, just briefly, of course, I started writing at primary school. I had a weekly newspaper, or classroom paper.
Oh, have you still got copies of that?
I've got. I can show you one of the later version. Yeah.
Yes, come on.
Let's have a look.
Excellent.
It's called the 1p Weekly Times on my primary school. And when I went to the secondary school, Capital Secondary School, I decided to carry on with the weekly newspaper, classroom newspaper. Anyway, this is it. I can see it.
Oh, amazing. The Comet. That's terrific. How old were you when you edited the Comet?
Let me think. Let me see. First year at secondary school, that would have been, I must have been about 13, I suppose.
Yeah.
And did you write about music? What did it write about?
Well, in this particular, so I don't know if you can read that, but it's actually an attack on the Soviet Union for invading Hungary.
That's very indignant.
I know. Its headline was "Murder in Hungary." I found it recently. I was horrified when I found it. I thought, how did I get away with that without being arrested by the...
I know.
So you started off politically engaged.
Yes. At last, the Russians have come into their own. By one treacherous act, they've revealed their true self. Hypocrites, liars, and bestial barbarians.
My God, you'd be on the business end of a poisoned dart if you wrote that today.
Normally, I wrote about school dinners and sports games.
Yeah.
School bullies and that sort of thing.
Oh, that's very impressive.
It was supposed to be funny, but that was a serious one.
Yeah.
So this led to a job in working on a paper.
Yes, I did. Well, of course, when I left school, we went to what's called the Youth Employment Office, and they said, well, what do you want to do when you leave school at 16? And I said, well, I'd like to be a Fleet Street reporter as a former editor. And they said, oh, well, we can offer you a job as a mastic asphalt lathe operative. And I gave a leaflet, which I think was laying tar on the roads. I think that was the idea. So I was pretty disgusted by that. And told my dad, and he said, oh, that's ridiculous. And because they were convinced I'd never get a job in Fleet Street. But I got a job on the Scotsman, age 16, as a copy boy, office editorial assistant. That was amazing, really. I was there for 3 years.
It's funny, all people who were music journalists at that stage nearly all came from the press, didn't they? And had proper training, and they nearly always got their break by doing a music review or interviewing some pop star backstage and selling it to a music paper. Is that what happened with you? How did you make the transition to the MM?
Well, it did work out that way, actually. Yeah, the first thing I had in print was a review of Louis Armstrong, which appeared in the Scotsman. Often, you did get a byline, of course, no initials even, and often wondered what the elderly Scottish readers of the Scotsman would make of me pontificating about Louis Armstrong.
Where was he playing?
He was playing at the Kilburn State. I think it was the Gaumont State Kilburn.
Gaumont State. God, that would have been fantastic.
I might have the program, actually. I did have the program. I've got it somewhere. Anyway, I kept the program. But yeah, it was a terrific concert. Yeah, fantastic. Danny Barcelona was on the drums. So I wrote this very erudite review about the art of Louis Armstrong and New Orleans jazz trumpet playing. So I don't know how I got away with it, really.
And did the MM sort of spot you, or did you go and knock on their door, or what happened then?
Well, after the Scotsman, 3 years there, during which time I went into every national newspaper office, delivering and collecting stuff like the Times, Daily Express, and so I knew how newspapers worked. And I wanted to get a job as a proper reporter, and I got a job with the Kentish Times, and I was there for about 3 years, 1960 to 64. And while I was there, of course, the Rolling Stones started to happen.
Oh, and they were on your patch.
Yeah. Right, so I wrote a piece about the Stones, which I can show you if I can.
Go on. Let's have a look.
Absolutely. Brilliant, you still got it. Hopeless chances, they'll never make it. See Welch.
I found it though. This is my local paper, the Kentish Times, Bexley's Observer. And,
Pop
fantastic.
Weirdies set out to play it grim.
yeah.
That's what a headline.
That's so. Did you write the headline, Chris?
Well, I have to confess the suburbs who wrote that headline.
Yes, I thought so.
But I said that of all the sensational groups to hit the British pop music scene since the advent of the Mersey sound, rhythm and blues revival, the weirdest, the oddest, and most uncompromising seem to be the Rolling Stones. So,
Right, there you go. So what year are we talking about there? 63? 64?
that would have been, let me have a look. I think it was,
Well, it must be 63 if you're referring to Mersey Beat and all that stuff.
yes, it was 63.
63.
Right.
Yeah, Dave and I were talking about this the other day. That was the time when they were still considered to be kind of ugly, weren't they? And kind of terrifying, and kind of lock up your daughters and all that, which is extraordinary.
Yeah, I went to see them playing at Greenwich Town Hall, and because we thought they had long hair, looked like long hair, and somebody shouted, "Get your hair cut!" And Mick said, "What? And look like you?"
That's right. Yeah. That little clip is on YouTube, actually.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, he does this brilliant impersonation of it, of Jagger. It's fantastic.
He must have done that quite a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and did that lead to you? How did that lead to you getting to the Melody Maker?
Well, I started writing about rhythm and blues a lot in the Bexley Observer and Welling Times. I used to say I worked for the Times and the Observer.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
And people, my colleagues, in those days, we had thousands of reporters, all the same age, 18 to 20, and having fantastic fun, really. And they said, "Oh, you should get a job on the music paper." And I read Melody Maker all the time. So actually, funny enough, I wrote to the NME first of all, but they didn't have a vacancy. But by a miracle, was actually looking for a new young reporter. I think Chris Roberts had just left, and he was my predecessor. So I wrote them a letter, and I think it was Ray Coleman wrote back and said, "Come up for an interview." So, and I sent them the cutting of the Rolling Stones articles.
Right. So where were the Melody Maker in those days? Where were they based?
Well, the MM was based back in Fleet Street, just opposite from where I used to work on the Scotsman. So I felt quite at home, really. And I love Fleet Street anyway, the whole vibe of the place. And I remember going up for the first interview, and as I walked in, Ray Collins said, "Ah, the letter writer." And of course, being endlessly writing combative letters to mailbag and the MM.
Oh, I see. You were a regular correspondent.
What were you complaining about? Presumably you were complaining.
I remember once complaining about Humphrey Littleton and his attitude to rock and roll.
Oh, there you go.
Which they printed. So I always avoided Humphrey Littleton after that.
Do you ever win an LP?
I did, yes, I won an LP.
So you were LP winner. Oh, that's fantastic. Because John Lennon, when he used to correspond with the Melody Maker, used to sign himself LP winner, didn't he?
That's right. It's very funny, yeah. Also, Disc magazine. Do you remember Disc?
Yes.
Yeah.
I won an LP writing to Disc.
Oh, very good. So you're obviously a regular correspondent. So Ray Coleman was the editor, was he?
Who else was Max Jones? Would have been there.
Was he Max Jones still there?
Richard Williams, would he have been there by then?
Not Richard. No, Richard came much later. This is 1964, and the editor, Jack Hutton.
Right.
The news editor was Ray Coleman, and a great team, really. And their mission was to turn Melody Maker from being what had been a dance band jazz paper into a Beatles and Stones rock and roll paper.
Yeah, because it was all kind of Frank Ifield and Brenda Lee and Del Shannon and Frankie Vaughan, wasn't it? And, there was Shads, I suppose, and the Pacemakers.
Well, yes, the early 60s, it was, the MM was in an odd position, really, because they had this fantastic heritage of going back to the 1920s. In fact, when I got there, they said the first thing you mustn't do is go and look in the back issues, which will be there for hours. They had all the bound volumes going back to the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
You just open a page and they'd be saying Louis Armstrong or Charlie Parker interview, just incredible. So they said you'll just spend all day reading that. So don't go and look at the back issues. But of course, by then, the MM was covering the Beatles very strongly. Ray Coleman was the main Beatles man. So my job was to write about the upcoming young British groups, the R&B scene. So all my favourites, Graham Bond. Oh, you love Bond.
Yeah.
Oh, I love Graham Bond. Oh, what great records. Yeah. And that Clapton interview, that was presumably your idea. Let's do the Yardbirds, was it? Or
yes. Well, actually, because Ray Coleman would tell me what I was going to be writing about. You had your weekly conference, and the Yardbirds came up. So that was one of the first bands I interviewed for the MS, the Yardbirds. And we all went into a coffee bar, a Cardamom coffee bar just around the corner. And the band complained bitterly, said, why can't we go to a pub? They didn't want to go to a coffee bar. And they were very noisy. Keith Ralph and Paul Samuel Smith and Jim, their drummer, and Eric, of course. And Eric was very smartly dressed. Yeah, it's fantastic taste in music. Cecil G, do you remember the?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, they were all mods, really, and Eric was the best dressed of all the mods.
And the kind of pieces that you wrote in those days were kind of news pieces, weren't they? They weren't kind of straight interviews, and they weren't the kind of big reflective profiles that we kind of came to associate with the late 70s. It was kind of like, what have you been doing and what are your future plans? Is that right?
Exactly. Yes, you have to keep it short.
Yeah.
We weren't even allowed to use tape recorders. In fact, they hadn't invented the.
I was going to say, yes.
I had to scribble. I learned to shorthand a bit, but my shorthand was terrible, so I just scribbled. So it was all notebooks, which impressed the band, actually, because they could see you were writing down what they were saying. So that's kind of a proper Fleet Street journalist. And
the great thing about notebooks is if you're not writing anything down, they get the message very strongly that they're not being very interesting.
Yeah, that's a really good
Which
point.
is when you've got a tape on, you can just be sitting there nodding the whole time thinking, well, I'm never going to even bother to transcribe this. But actually, they get accelerated by the fact that you don't appear to be engaged.
Yes, you are engaged with them, that's true. Yeah. Also, the other thing is, of course, you don't end up transcribing hours and hours of needless quotes.
Yeah.
So the pieces you were writing had to be fast and news stories, really. The funny thing about that Yardbirds interview was that the good angle, you always had to get a good angle for the story, and the angle was that the Yardbirds didn't want to have a hit record.
That was it, wasn't it?
Yes.
Because that was
made it very cool.
But that was the big debate in those days, wasn't it? What was real and what wasn't? What was selling out and what wasn't?
Yeah.
I remember the letters pages of the Melody Maker and all the other ones were pretty much at this time were obsessed with what's real rhythm and blues and what's not.
Exactly. That's what Eric was saying to me. And there was this, he felt that if they had a hit record, it would destroy their credibility with their fans, because he was well into playing blues, obviously, and he really didn't like the idea of Yardbirds having a hit. Good Morning Little Schoolgirls, the track.
Yes, absolutely. Produced by Mickey Most, wasn't it? I think it was.
Yes. I didn't quite realise that at the time. We never went into the huge details about who the engineer or producer was. Perhaps we should have done later. But I remember Eric giving me this quizzical look as if to say, I'm not with these guys.
Oh, yeah. Well, he wasn't for long, was he, really?
No.
That's what I was going to say, because that's why I'm with loads of those people, is that they went on. So many of those guys you must have covered when they were kind of scuffling around in bands doing the marquee or whatever, were superstars within 3 years, weren't they? Kind of world figures. You must have seen a lot of change, as they say.
Yes, that was the exciting thing about being on Melody Maker then. You did see people literally playing to a handful of people upstairs at Ronnie Scott's club or in some pub somewhere. And within weeks, sometimes, if they had a hit record, they'd be megastars and on the front page, on the cover.
Yeah.
By the way, when I went to see the Yardbirds, I went to see them at the Bromwell Club. And Eric looked really fed up. And I went over to him and said, you look fed up. He said, oh, you noticed, did you? And a week later, he'd left the band.
That's what he did.
Where did he go? John Mayall's Blues Breakers.
Yes.
Yes, he was, wasn't it?
Yeah,
the famous Beano cover. Yeah.
That's quite, But yes, going to all the clubs and seeing all the bands then, you never knew. I mean, I could tell you about one story where I went upstairs at Ronnie's, and because they had an upstairs room.
Yeah.
And I was with Peter Frampton. We'd been drinking in the Chasse in Water Street, and we thought we'd go up to Ronnie's and see who was playing. And there was this strange band playing, but the singer had a big bass drum in front of him. He was kicking this bass drum and playing the flute, and it was Genesis. playing to about a handful of people.
Oh, really?
Upstairs at Ronnie Scott's farm. Yeah.
God, that's very early on.
Oh, that was it. Then,
Was Peter Gabriel was there any shaved heads or anything like that going on at that stage?
No, I don't think so. No. Oh, and not with Peter. No, he hadn't quite got into that stage yet.
No.
But there were lots of people. I remember seeing Peter Green playing in Flamingo Club downstairs with a band. I can't remember who they were now. I think it was Shotgun Express or something.
Yeah.
Like that. You probably remember which band it was, but he was quite cocky and he was shouting, "I'm better than Eric Clapton." He was telling the audience through the loudspeakers.
Do you remember? I can so remember as the Melody Maker reader that there was always they were always trying to confect those kind of rivalries: Beatles versus Stones, Clapton versus Hendrix, Bolan versus Bowie. Can you remember helping cook those things up in the office?
Yes, we did. Yeah, so a lot of that was to do with Ray Coleman, of course. He came from the national newspapers. And his whole, I had to follow Ray's direction. Yes. He wanted a story where everyone was rowing and arguing with each other, or about to break up, or something ghastly, something terrible was going to happen to the band or the singer. And one of them was, he told me that the Animals were going to break up and that they'd been a flop in America. And that upset Chaz Chandler when I put that to him. And he said, "Don't be soft." I remember him saying, "No, we're not breaking." But the big row was between Tom Jones and PJ Proby.
Oh yes, of course, yeah.
PJ versus PJ. So I interviewed PJ quite a few times, so that was fun. Yeah. And when I first met Tom Jones was just about the time It's Not Unusual was happening, and they said, "Oh, there's this guy who's got a hit record. Go to Top of the Pops and interview him." So I'd never met him or seen him. So I went to Top of the Pops backstage in this rather grubby, grimy studio, BBC Centre. I don't think it was Lion Grove. I can't remember. Anyway, as I walked in, there was this Dalek standing in the corner, covered in dust. They shared the studio with Doctor Who, which I couldn't believe. And I was saying, "Where the hell is Tom Jones?" This bloke came over to me and said, "Have you got a light, mate?" I said, "Yeah, okay." And I lit his cigarette. I said, "I'm looking for Tom Jones." He said, "That's me." So that's how I met Tom Jones.
You thought he didn't look like a rock star.
Not at all. No.
Did he not have his shirt slashed to the waist?
No, not. We were standing there smoking his best. You could smoke in the studio. That's how.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did the interview later in his council flat, sharing with his mum and dad in Shepherd's Bush. So whenever I saw him years later with this fantastic medallions superstar hanging out with us, I remember us doing an interview in a council flat in Shepherd's Bush. Early days.
When you got the big albums to review, I mean, presumably I can still remember your review of Abbey Road, I think it was. You said, "The truth is their latest LP is just a natural born gas, entirely free of pretension, deep meanings or symbolism." And how long did you, I mean, was it the same later on? I suppose you had no time to listen to that. I mean, you just had to bang it out really quick. Well, that was a very good point.
Often, yeah. We did actually have a little cell in the Melody Maker office. It was like a cell with the gramophone.
Yeah.
We could spend some time there listening to it. So I first heard the first Led Zeppelin album, being pretty stunned by that. But with the Beatles, actually, Sgt. Pepper, they did actually give you a copy of the album, but you weren't allowed to take it away from EMI headquarters in Manchester Square. So I was sort of
so you're locked in a little cubicle with somebody watching you. Yeah.
And I wasn't allowed to take the copy away. But it's quite an honour, really. And we actually devoted half a page to it, which is unheard of. 3 paragraphs.
Well, the MM campaigned for the Beatles to get MBEs, I think, didn't they? Weren't they the prime movers in making that happen?
I'm not sure. That might have been Ray Coleman doing that. I don't remember that. I wasn't involved in that. I don't recall that as a campaign as such. It may well be,
Yeah.
So tell us about Led Zeppelin, because I think I'm right in saying you were, didn't you go to Belfast when they first played Stairway to Heaven?
I did, yes. That was incredible, yeah. I've been to, the first gig I went to see, I saw the Zeppelin first of all at the Marquee, playing to about 200 people. And then I saw them at the Lyceum Ballroom, and I did a review. I remember that the Lyceum had been bombed by a German Zeppelin in 1917 or 15. and I wrote that as the introduction. So Germany bombed the Lyceum with a Zeppelin. Then Led Zeppelin came back 50 years later and then bombed it again.
Yeah, there it is.
Very good intro. Peter Grant loved the intro. And, he said, "Oh, great. I've not known him before." He rang me and said, "I really like that. Would you like to come to New York and see the band playing at Carnegie Hall?" Wow. So that was my first trip to America.
Hey, so what year are we talking about there? 69, something?
Yeah, 69, I think it was. Yeah.
Right.
And when I got to New York, and, shall I tell you the story? What happened?
Go on.
Yeah, go on.
Well, we were booked into the Hilton Hotel, which is all very exciting for me. Never been to New York before. And it's a fantastic hotel. And came down in the morning and said, "How did you enjoy the entertainment last night?" I said, "Entertainment? No, I just watched TV." And they said, "Well, we sent a hooker with whips and what else did they have?"
Handcuffs.
3 hookers with whips to my bedroom. That was Led Zeppelin's little joke. But apparently they'd been arrested by the house detective, so I never saw them.
You never got there. See, wow.
This was Zeppelin's plan for the MN. Yeah.
Well, I don't know whether to be disappointed about that or not. The fact that they didn't arrive.
No, I'm trying to imagine what your reaction would have been if they had arrived. What story would you be telling us?
I know, champagne and whips. That was it. 3 hookers.
Yeah.
I think Cole was behind that. I'm not sure.
What do you remember of Stairway to Heaven? You said in Belfast. Yeah.
Yeah, just briefly, when I got to see Zeppelin on stage at Carnegie Hall, which was amazing, and they'd sold out and they didn't have a ticket for me. So they said, "You'll have to stand on the stage." Oh, okay, which was even better. You know, I was actually standing on the stage while playing all those fantastic songs. And John Bonham said to me, "I've got to be good tonight. This is where Gene Kruger and Buddy Rich played." And I said, "Yeah, they did. I don't know if you remember that. They used to do drum battles."
Yes.
So a bit of history going on there. And then later, after coming back from the States, and then the band were booked on this tour, a small club tour, I think.
Yes.
And they were going to play in the Ulster Hall, I think.
The Ulster Hall. It's 1971, so it's 50 years ago this spring.
Yeah. In Belfast, so we all flew over there in this rather dodgy plane. By the way, whenever I flew anywhere, I usually sat with John Bonham, and he was always sick because he hated flying, and he was always nervous. He was very nervous. He got terrible stage fright. You wouldn't believe it, would you?
Really?
I had no idea.
A drummer with stage fright. You don't think
so
of, do you?
Unlikely. Yeah.
So he was literally sick often because he had to play this huge drum solo, keep Jimmy and Robert happy, and he had all this weight on his shoulders. And although he seemed very bluff and in your face and rebellious, actually he's quite a shy person underneath it all. Nervous. But,
well, Plant had all sorts of stage fright problems, didn't he? Just
I think
agonised by it, whether or not he could hit the top notes. And
that's true. And Jimmy, I remember being with them in Germany and seeing them all looking incredibly nervous before going on to this crowd. They were all throwing firecrackers under the German fans.
Well, you would be. You would be nervous.
But moving on to a night in Belfast, there was a bit of a riot going on outside. I didn't realise this at the time, but the troubles were sort of kicking off, and we were really enjoying the show, and all the young girls screaming for Robert, and guys yelling for Jimmy, and the place was packed, and the atmosphere was incredible. And this chap came up behind me and said, I said, "Isn't it great?" He said, "Yeah, and just think, there's a serious riot going on outside." Oh, good. Didn't know that. Anyway, they finished with this fantastic new arrangement, beautiful song. And I mentioned it to Robert afterwards. I said, "What was that new song you played?" He said, "Oh, did you like it? It's called Stairway to Heaven." And that's the first time I heard them play it. So I'm quite chuffed that I actually liked it. They needed the reassurance that nobody knew it was going to be a gigantic hit. It's just
absolutely. Yeah. Well, it took a long time to register, really, didn't it? Stairway to Heaven, because it's never a hit single or anything like that. It was just slowly over a period of years, radio stations just played it and kept on playing it, didn't they? Really?
Yes, it really took everybody by surprise. Yes.
Yeah.
Were there any groups that you felt you were kind of instrumental in helping to actually form, and also to helping by writing about them to launch their career?
Yes, there was one in particular, The Nice, I think.
Oh, right, yeah.
I knew Brian Davison, and I knew Keith a little. I didn't know Keith that well. But
So you introduced them?
yes, in a way I did actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I knew Davey O'List, the guitar player from the previous band, with Richard Sherman, and we'd all hung out together in clubs like Cromwellian, and you know, it's like there was a big nightclub scene going on, and all the musicians would mingle. It's great fun. There was there was a drummers' organisation called the Thinking Union of Rolling Drummers, which had a peculiar spelling, and Slags, that was the other one, Society of Looning Alcoholic Guitarists, and which had back in there at Clapton. And Davey O'List was a sort of honorary member, and I was a member too. I was the scribe. I was the chief scribe. But that's how everybody got to know each other, and that's how I knew guys from. Brian Davison had been in the Martin. And Davey wanted to form a new band, and we all met in Davey O'List's flat in Earl's Court. And this amazing pianist turned up, and he started playing the upright piano. I think he was playing Take 5 and Boogie Woogie and all that. It was Keith Emerson. So that's how I first met Keith. And we all sat around and thinking about we should form a band. You know? They should form a band. And they started rehearsing a little bit. And they got some sandwiches. Davey O'List's parents bought some sandwiches for us to eat. And then the sandwiches disappeared. And we discovered their dog had eaten the sandwiches, which became part of nice lore.
Nice lore.
We went off to a pub and sat around and they formed the band in a pub in West London.
So this is the period during which bands' kind of stage presentation was getting more and more extreme, I suppose. And the nicest classic example of it, isn't it? You know, a lot of it was there was this great stress on serious musicianship, but at the same time, as showmanship, like Screaming Jay Hawkins or anything like that, wasn't it? You know.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Well, you had to win over audiences. I mean, you have to remember British audiences were rather conservative in those days. And I mean, we're all used to people screaming and yelling and cheering now, but they didn't do that until they realised that's what the Americans did. When I saw Zeppelin at Carnegie Hall, I couldn't believe the reaction. They were jumping up and down, screaming, cheering, yelling, shaking hands with the musicians. Total interaction between the audience.
Whereas in Britain, the audiences were seated still, weren't they?
They're still sitting down.
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah,
very polite, and with people wandering up and down, telling them to stay sitting down. Actually, a lot of the time,
people would complain if somebody stood up.
Yeah, they couldn't see anything. Exactly.
Complaining bitterly all the time.
Yeah.
Sit down. They used to shout, "Sit down."
Yeah,
they did. That's so rock and roll. That really is.
Sit down.
So. Are there any? I just think that you interviewed absolutely everybody. I think people like Scott Walker and Dusty and all that. I mean, is there anyone who, in particular, who just stood out as being particularly charismatic and interesting?
Well, Scott Walker was. Yes,
was he
remarkable? Yeah, we got on very well actually because I turned up to interview him one day and he had a black eye. I said, "What's happened to you?" He said, "Oh, somebody hit me last night, a cab driver." Because he was prone to getting into arguments with people. So I wrote the piece saying last night somebody walked all over a Walker brother, and he liked that introduction.
Ray Coleman would have liked that.
He did, yes, that's right.
Ray Coleman, he wrote headlines. I can remember his headlines now. Bay City Bonkers, Wings, Metal Fatigue. He was very kind of flip, wasn't it?
Yes. Well, we were a tabloid newspaper.
Yeah.
We were in a huge circulation battle with all the other papers. So. News stories, I was always desperate to get an exclusive about a band breaking up, like maybe Cream or Traffic or Jimi Hendrix Experience. And you didn't want the enemy to beat you to it, or record mirror or disc.
So that's interesting. So do you think you probably triggered bands breaking up in your keenness? I don't mean you particularly, but I mean generally speaking.
Well, there was a case where normally I was very supportive of bands, but if I saw a band playing really badly, I thought, even if they were friends, I had to come out with the horrid truth that it wasn't a great gig. And a particular one was Jethro Tull, and they did this Passion Play. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it's all about pretentious. They made the audience wait for about 20 minutes before they actually started playing. That wasn't a good thing. So in the end, to cut a long story short, I gave them a bad review. And Ian Anderson was so upset that he said, I'm going to break the group up. So next week, Melody Maker breaks up Jethro Tull. Press release. So they did actually briefly break up, but I discovered later that it's cooked up a bit between Jethro Tull's manager and Ray Coleman, without telling me that they were going to do this stunt whereby they claimed that they were so hurt by my terrible review they'd break the group up. That was one occasion.
But it was the era, wasn't it? Of that was the stuff of Melody Maker front pages, wasn't it? So and so is leaving. So and so, might join up with.
Exactly.
Because there was a brief period where they were sort of behaving like jazzers, weren't they? Really?
Yes.
It's like football in the transfer market.
Yeah, it was like that. Yeah. So, well, of course, being Melody Maker with its jazz roots, and my interest in jazz and musicianship, and that's why I like bands like Cream, because they're all fantastic musicians, and they're nice, and what we later call progressive rock, which I took from progressive jazz, by the way. So that's what I call.
So are you the man that invented progressive rock?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah.
Oh my lord! Dave, this is an exclusive, isn't it?
That's very good. Very good. I'm always interested in tracing the roots of these things.
So you invented the term?
Well, along with supergroup, I think. Yes, it all came together.
And supergroup as well.
Well, I wrote a piece.
So were you the first person to call a band progressive rock?
Yes, because I was a fan of progressive jazz, which was like Dave Brubeck and Stan.
Yeah.
There's a big West Coast movement and particular genre of jazz, and it seemed to fit when young musicians decided, well, we're not going to keep on playing 12-bar blues. We can't keep on copying Chuck Berry and Muddy Waters forever. Let's write our own songs and then arrange them, and that's when it became progressive. So it's progressive rock. Yeah. Years later, it became prog rock.
Yeah, it did.
It did.
Which is sort of a different thing, isn't it? Prog rock. To me, it feels like a different thing. Because I can remember the period when I can remember progressive coming in, which I suppose would be 67, 68. Would it something like that? Or is it earlier? Oh. But then there was also underground rock, it was called.
Yes,
very concurrent.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. There was this one. The great thing about being on the MM then was that the music scene was changing virtually every week, and there were new bands coming on, and it's got harder and harder to keep a pace with it. It was pretty frantic in the 60s. By the 70s, it was just incredible, really. And of course, there was a lot of competition between the groups. And just thinking back now, how fast it was from The Nice, which I think was one of the first bands to experiment and use showmanship. We were talking about showmanship.
Yeah.
And The Nice with Keith Emerson did at the same time, because what they were afraid of was they wanted to play like maybe mix classical and jazz and rock together, but they were afraid of boring audiences, so they do everything visually as well.
Yes,
so, explosions and knives and daggers.
Yes,
the audience's attention.
It's this mad combination, isn't it? The two things. Yeah.
So if you got bored with a 10-minute drum solo, don't worry, there'll be some stabbing going on.
Yes.
And an explosion. Yeah. So there was a lot of fun involved. And then there was King Crimson and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Yes, who I loved a lot. I thought they were a great group. And it just exploded. And Pink Floyd, of course. So all different styles. That's the interesting thing about it.
Did you prosper? I get the feeling you prospered because you had an ability to get on with people.
Well, people say that, which is nice to know. And, yes, because I wanted to talk to them about their music rather than just continuously sort of stirring up trouble.
No, but you were never vicious. You were never kind of aggressive.
No, I wanted to help bands. I really did. When I saw a great group that I liked, say, for example, the Spencer Davis group, I thought were fantastic. You'd see these, or the Art Woods, and you know that they're all great musicians at heart, like people like John Law with the Art Woods.
Yeah.
Stevie Winwood with Spencer Davis group, who I thought was incredible. He was only about 18. I remember going to a pub with him once, and he said, "Oh, I'm allowed to drink now." I said, "Well, we've been drinking in pubs for the last year." He'd only just reached the age where he was...
Yeah. Well, he was about 15 when he first appeared with them, wasn't he?
That's right. He was looked after by his brother Mutt, who became a huge head at Island Records. But and I went on the road with a lot of the bands. like the Spencer Davis group. I go up to Birmingham to see them and travel with them in their bus. And, so we all became friends. Yeah, Spencer was a lovely guy. So good friends. Yeah.
Can you remember the effect of Mick Watt's interview with Bowie at the time, which was a major? Tell us that story. It was a major breakthrough, wasn't it?
Yes. Mick sort of broke the rules a little bit by revealing that he thought David was gay, and that's something that you just didn't say about people in those days, unless you wanted to get into a fight with somebody or destroy their career. Maybe, I don't know. The reaction might have been that way.
I thought David had said he was, though.
Well, he got him to admit it. Yeah, he got him to say it. I think Mick sort of put it to him, and then he said it. Yes, he was. So that was the revelation, really. You know?
It was an amazing revelation.
It did, yes, and it helped make Michael Watts' career as well, in a way, because it made him famous, and then it gave David this fantastic star. What's the word? Charisma. Yeah. Yeah.
I've got such fond memories of the Melody Maker polls. Remember those days where it'd be best singer Robert Plant, best guitarist Jimmy Page, best bassist John Paul Jones, wasn't it? You know? and there was only ever about 3 women. There was Maggie Bell, Julie Driscoll, and Christine Perfect,
and Sandy Denny.
And Sandy Denny. Sorry, 4 women in rock. Yeah,
Lulu, of course, Lulu. So she was a star too. Yeah.
Who's that?
Lulu.
Well.
Oh no, Lulu. Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
So yeah, people say there weren't enough women in rock in those days. Actually, there was a lot, really. And behind the scenes too, there were PRs and managers, and so it wasn't quite as misogynistic as people think it was.
No.
Yeah.
There weren't many women journalists. There was only Penny Valentine, Valerie Wilman. Not so many, yeah, but that's true. Yeah. But I remember going to one of the first Melody Maker Poll Awards. It was upstairs of the post office tower. Do you remember the post office?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's very funny because the post office tower revolves.
Yes.
And people didn't take that into consideration. There was the bar, we were sitting at the bar, and everything was spinning around in the middle. So all the drinks and the food and the awards are disappearing, going around in a circle, which caused endless problems.
So you put your drink down and it disappeared.
It'd come back again.
Oh, right.
But 3 minutes later, it would reappear, presumably.
Finished off by John Bonham.
Along with your steak and chips. Yeah, exactly.
And that's when Dusty lost her temper with the waiter, and she threw a cake at him, which made the front page of the Daily Mirror, which was great publicity. She lost her.
Who was the most difficult person you ever had to interview?
Most difficult? Well, funny enough, I got on very well with Van Morrison. I thought he'd be difficult, but we did a really good interview, actually. Everybody said, he won't speak to you, but he did. He was okay. Oh, I know somebody very difficult. That was the drummer with the Band of Gypsies. Who died recently.
Billy Cox. No.
Billy, not Billy Cox.
No, Billy Cox was a bass player. No. Oh God, I can't remember. I can't remember.
I should those days. It will come to me in a minute.
But he was difficult.
He was difficult. Yeah, he apologised later. Yeah.
All right.
Well, I interviewed Dizzy Gillespie, the jazz trumpet player, at Ronnie Scott's, and he did the whole interview sitting with his back to me, which wasn't very, very polite. So,
why did he do that?
He just generally had. He wasn't very impressed with music journalists of the breed. It took a lot of getting to get to speak to him, actually.
So how did the atmosphere change in the 70s? There was a big recruitment campaign. You got Alan Jones and Mary Harron and Ian Birch and John Savage and people like that. I mean, you were still there. When did you leave? About 1980? Was it around then? You left around 1980, I think, didn't you? So you would have been there when the new guard arrived.
Yes. That was the other thing. Was over the years, of course, more and more the staff would change. They're all friends and mates, and in the early days, and then you get new people coming in, and most of the time, we all became friends, but there was gradually became an age difference where new reporters would come and you say, "Hi, how are you?" Chat to them, and you realise they'd never heard of Georgie Fame. They didn't know who the hell he was. So talking to them about people they had no idea I was talking about. I was revering, say, the Yardbirds. I remember the Yardbirds. Who the hell are they? Like they were into television or what's happening in New York, New Wave, and punk rock. So there was an age gap building up.
Did you find punk rock difficult? I can remember when I was working for Record Mirror, going to review Slaughter and the Dogs at the Marquee. And I remember you being there and almost being kind of pushed into the room by the PR because you look a real horror, which I totally understood, of these kind of gobbing, audience members.
I didn't like that at all, I have to confess. But I did go thinking, well, I'm a journalist, so I should go and report on what's happening.
Yeah.
I should do. Keith Moon told me I should go and see the punk rock bands for a start. So I did go and see Sex Pistols at Brunel University, and I thought they were great, actually. I was standing at the back, and they, to my surprise, they were taking it quite seriously. Johnny Rotten was saying, "Do you like the guitar sound?" And he actually seemed to be engaging with the audience.
Yeah,
taking the music seriously, which surprised me, as opposed to all their image of swearing and gobbling and rioting. So, though underneath it all, the Sex Pistols were almost a progressive rock band in their own way.
Oh, that's good. God, we haven't asked you. Did you dig out any old records to show us, or have you got any? Did you get any old sleeves that you were going to?
Yes. Yes, that's right. Actually, the first I did loads of sleeve notes, but the first one I ever did was for Graham Bond, the Graham Bond organisation.
Oh right, you wrote the sleeve notes.
I'll show you that one.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of theirs, and there it is.
Oh wow, that's
okay.
fantastic cover that is. I remember
That's good.
that.
I did the sleeve notes on the back.
Oh, what? What's the right? Read us the last sentence of the sleeve note, Chris. I want to know.
Okay.
Go on. Read us the last bit.
All in all, a winner.
Okay. Sophisticated, raw, savage, and soulful. Their music is all these things. It is the music of the Graham Bond organisation. The sound of 65.
Very good.
Oh,
Very good.
God.
It's a good cover. Really good graphic. That cover.
Beautiful.
Oh,
It's
there's
beautiful.
behind there. Yeah, 1965, and the cover was drawn by Ginger Baker.
Oh, was it?
Hold
Really?
it up again. Let's see.
It is. It's a very. To hold it a bit higher, actually, Chris. But
Oh, sorry.
there you go.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant. It's
amazing.
a brilliant cover.
Very proud of it, and it's in the style of Jackson Pollock.
Oh right. So that is the Graham Bond organisation with Graham Bond, Ginger Baker,
Dick Hextall
Jack
Smith.
Bruce, and Dick Hextall Smith. I saw them. I saw them once.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Used to wear black polo necks.
That's
If
right.
is that right? They did.
Yeah.
Didn't they?
Yeah.
They
Bond
did.
was a terrifying looking man. Wasn't
Yes.
They were a scary guy.
Huge man with kind of very greasy hair. He looked like a
looked like-
bouncer or a gangster.
He looked like Peter Grant, is what it looked like.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
He was a monster. But Ginger Baker was a monster as well. I interviewed him. That's what
Oh,
he said, I'm a monster. But the
In
story.
what way am I interviewed him too? And he was really difficult. The only interview I've ever walked out of. What was he like with you?
Well, because I knew Ginger from the start, and one of the first people I interviewed. We got on very well because I was a drummer as well. So
Yeah.
he was always very kind to me. I could see him. I winced when I watched him, how he behaved with other people. That's dreadful, really. He could be notoriously rude and grumpy. But no, we had a good relationship. He was fine.
Have you got more stuff there, Chris, to show us?
Just briefly with the Graham Bond sleeve note. It was the first
Yeah.
note I've ever done. And the manager had commissioned me to write it. And the manager was Robert Stigwood. And
right.
And I went to the office to give him the notes, typewritten notes. And he said, "Oh, I suppose you need paying." And rather grudgingly, he gave me this crumpled 10-shilling note, which is screwed up.
10-shilling note.
10-shilling note, which is 50p, yeah.
Yeah, well, I know. Yeah.
Years later, I went to try and interview Robert. And he came up to London in a huge yacht through they opened the gates of Tower Bridge, so Robert Stigwood
To get his yacht.
arrived in London, yeah. And I thought, I remember him giving me a 10-shilling note.
That's how you get to afford yachts. Pay
Yeah.
people in crumpled 10-shilling notes.
Yeah.
By the way, that was the first one of the first stories I did for the NN, which was
It's motorbikes.
What's
Nick.
the headline?
Shangri-La's hit town.
Oh,
Talked to Chris
wonderful.
Welch. So you interviewed the Shangri-Las. Brilliant.
Mary Weiss.
Can you remember where that was?
Well, it was in a hotel. It was in the where it was. Did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the. Let's see. Where did I see it? I should say it in the story somewhere. I can't remember.
Don't worry.
Don't worry.
It might have been the Hilton. I think it was the Hilton. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were great. I loved the Shangri-Las. And I saw that Mary Weiss, who I interviewed then, she's about 17. She made a comeback recently, back into the music business. And
Good grief.
I thought I ought to write to her and say, "Do you remember me?"
Yeah. So would you have gone to that looking for a particular quote that you thought already could have got some coverage for the piece?
I made up the quote afterwards about the the headline was about them wearing kinky boots and having big bow ties, about their dress and their appearance. And she was very funny. She had a great sense of humour. So, but I didn't have any preset idea of what I was going to write. I just reacted to what I found,
Right.
Yeah.
And
So, have you ever written your memoirs, Chris?
No, my wife keeps telling me I should. Yeah, I haven't done it yet.
You should do.
Why haven't you?
Well, there was a reason. I did in the 80s. I approached the publisher and said, I met all these bands and written about all these people, and I had a great career as a music journalist. And he said, "Oh no, nobody's interested in books by music journalists."
Well, that was the 80s. I mean, and possibly they might have been right that nobody wanted to read about the Yardbirds and Emerson, Lake and Palmer in the 80s. Scott Walker.
Yeah, I was quite miffed, to tell you the truth. So I thought, that's true, and I won't bother then. And then years later, of course, everybody started writing their memoirs.
Yeah.
I still haven't done mine yet. But I'll have to go. Thanks for the encouragement. I'll do it.
You should. You should. So, Chris, we traditionally finish these things by asking people to tell us what's the greatest record ever made.
Well,
Do you know?
Well, I can only go by one particular album that is nothing to do with rock music, I'm afraid. But,
Right, okay. Sorry.
I mean, there are some wonderful albums like Sgt. Pepper, Bowie by Jimi Hendrix, or any Steely Dan album you care to mention, which I think are fantastic productions. But there's one particular record that I really liked, which I put down on the floor. Hold on.
You lost it again.
No. Oh, but I got it.
I'm intrigued by this. So it's not rock and roll.
No,
So it's a jazz record, presumably.
It just happens to be a record I particularly liked, and I thought was from the best of its genre, and that's this one.
Oh, Atomic
Count Basie?
Basie. Atomic but Count Basie.
yeah.
Yes.
It's the Atomic Mr. Basie.
Absolutely.
What a cover. That's fantastic.
That was in the days when somebody thought, what would be a good visual? I know.
An
Mass
atomic-
slaughter.
Oh, yeah. That'll sell.
That
People
would
love
be a
all that.
laugh.
Yeah.
Well, as it turned out, it was a hit record. Yeah, wasn't it?
It was. It's still.
Yeah.
I've got a CD of that. It's a fantastic record.
It is.
It's a brilliant record.
Just
Well,
every track is different and brilliant, and playing them is just marvelous.
Right. Well, look, it's been lovely to talk to you, Chris,
Oh, really?
and thank you very much for your time.
A pleasure. Yeah.
Thoroughly.
Word in Your Attic, a Zoom with a View.